Welcome to History Happy Hour, a special series from History Uncovered. It's the end of March 2023, and we've handpicked a few of our favorite history stories from this month. Today, we'll talk about
the death of the last member of the Nazi resistance group, White Rose,
how a metal detectorist stumbled upon the oldest known mention of the god Odin,
the discovery of a Roman shrine high up in the Swiss Alps,
a new study about the genetic differences found in the dogs of Chernobyl,
the discovery of a new Malai statue on Easter Island,
as well as a number of historical anniversaries from March, including the first televised Academy Awards, the very mysterious death of Josef Stalin, and more. I'm All It's Interesting staff writer Kalina Fraga.
And I'm All It's Interesting staff writer Austin Harvey. Before we begin, we just wanted to remind listeners of the show, we are currently conducting a survey as part of the Airwave Podcast Network. It helps us to get to know you, your interests, what you think of the show, and helps us make the show better. So if you're interested in helping out, you can find the questionnaire at surveymonkey.com/r/airwave. And as a special thank you, you'll be entered for a chance to win a $500 Amazon gift card. Again, that's surveymonkey.com/r/airwave, or you can click the link in our episode notes.
All right, so we're going to start things off by talking about some of our favorite news posts that we wrote this month that stood out to us. So the first one we have here is about Traute Lefren's page, who was the last surviving member of the White Rose resistance group in Nazi Germany.
Yeah, I actually just read this one this morning. I didn't really know much about the White Rose because I didn't pay attention to World War II stuff in school.
I don't think this was mentioned much in like World War II classes.
It probably wasn't.
Resistant groups like this, especially this one, which was so small, but it stands out because they were young.
Yeah.
Like very young people. And because it has a tragic ending, the two leaders were siblings, Hans and Sophie Scholl. And they were both executed in their 20s, early 20s.
Yeah, by guillotine.
Yeah. Oof.
Yeah.
But it was, again, a very small group, but they did what they could to kind of like raise the alarm about Hitler and the Nazis. They graffitied buildings and they printed out pamphlets and spread them around. And this woman, who died at the ripe old age of 103 this month, was part of that resistance group.
Yeah. From what I remember reading it, she was imprisoned because of her obvious connection to the other two. Mm-hmm. But what was it, 2 days before she was set to stand trial?
Something crazy like that. Yeah.
The American army liberated the prison that she was being held at.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Talk about, I feel like we kind of talked about the same thing. There's like some weird parallels to stories we talked about last month, but Solomon Perel. Mm-hmm. Very similar sort of like kind of dodging fate in a way, or escaping their doomed fate.
Yeah,
very
Solomon
interesting story.
Perel, just to remind everyone, was a young, I guess a teenager in Nazi Germany. He was Jewish. He was basically forced to take on an identity as a Nazi youth to survive the war. And you're right, they're two very interesting stories of how people lived through this time, either by resisting or, in his case, not really acquiescing, but becoming someone else in order to survive. Yeah,
hiding. Living like a secret life. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to be able to like have those firsthand accounts. What I thought was really interesting about the Traute Lefren's page one was that how not outspoken about it she was for most of her life. I think her kids didn't even realize until like the mid 70s.
Yeah, like decades
what
later.
Their mom had been doing. And it's like, it's funny because she didn't really have much reason to like keep it a secret, given that she was liberated and moved to America and was free. So like, I don't know. I very easily could have just been outspoken about that and I don't want to say capitalized on it because that sounds like it's making light of tragedy, but like she very easily could have made that a part of her identity, wrote a book. I think she did eventually, but like these things immediately after the war. And instead she was like, nope, just going to live a normal life and count my blessings here. And like, I kind of respect that.
Yeah. I think you see that fairly often with people who resisted the Nazis in one way or the other, where they'll say like, I'm like not a hero. I just did what any decent person would do kind of thing. You see that all the time. But yeah, that was a really fascinating story. And I think she witnessed sort of an unknown part of that history, kind of like you said about World War II and Nazi Germany, these resistance movements, especially among young people.
Yeah, it really speaks to like kind of, again, we talked about it last month with Martin Luther King Jr. being like 25 at the time that he was doing everything. You see that like the younger people are the ones who can like push change in a way that other generations can't. So there's something inspiring to be said about that as well.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I was just thinking, I read this book about Germany after World War II, and after the war, like one way that people like just like dealt with the guilt and the trauma and everything was to see it as like a fresh start or like a blank slate instead of dealing with what had happened. And it wasn't until like the 60s and the 70s that their children pushed back against that. And we're like, we need to, like, how could you do that?
We need to talk about what happened.
We need to talk about this. Yeah, exactly. I thought that was a fascinating thing.
Yeah, I kind of get that. Like, just kind of like, I don't know, how do you deal with a collective country's trauma all at once? I think it's like, especially at that point in time, like, no, people didn't talk about emotions and things. I mean, at least in America, like, I have to imagine it was probably the same in post-Nazi Germany, that they were just like, we're going to wash our hands of that one and never talk about this.
Yeah, and the book was really fascinating. So it was called Aftermath by Harold Yonner, but it's just about how they saw people had to see like beauty and like redemption and not like touch that third rail of like guilt. They couldn't do it right after the war, which was kind of fascinating to me. But you mentioned this story was similar to other stories we covered, and the next news story we're going to talk about, I think, is also really similar.
Yeah,
because we keep writing stories about like people picking up a metal detector for like the very first time and then finding incredible treasure.
that was the first one that I noticed that I was like, oh crap, same thing. Yeah. To clue people in, this story is about an amateur metal detectorist who found a coin, a pendant with the oldest known reference to the Norse god Odin on it.
Yeah. It's their very first time using a metal detector.
Which is just insane. Like, I want to buy a metal detector now just to see, like, what'll I find? Yeah.
You might have to go to Europe to find, like, I guess there's probably stuff around here, but...
You find, like, Civil War relics, maybe.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And nothing quite as exciting as a 1,500-year-old gold piece with Odin's personage on it.
Yeah. I think the coolest part about this story was they said there's like an inscription on the coin about Odin. And they said this is like the most worn down part of it, which means that the person was touching it all the time. Yeah. Which I just liked that kind of like image of someone, I don't know, it's touching this coin or pendant again and again just to get like comfort or something.
It's like you see people who wear like cross necklaces around their necks. They always like... maybe not, but I feel like it's a thing in movies that people will like rub it if they're like anxious or we talk about how much people have changed over the course of history, but also how little they've changed.
Yeah,
like definitely. We still held on to these like symbols, and it's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's just an incredible thing to find in your first outing with the metal detector. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It
really justifies that purchase.
Yeah, right. I wonder how much they are. I don't actually know.
Yeah, in my head, for some reason, I'm like, oh, they're like $1,000. They're probably not that much.
Yeah, there's probably like cheap ones out there, I would imagine.
I'm gonna look it up real quick.
All right, yeah.
Oh, you can get one for like $150.
Oh,
This one's they have one for $88. Wow.
I wonder if there's a big difference between ones that are like $88 and ones that are much more expensive, because they all do the same thing.
Oh, this one's like $400. Okay, there is a $1,600 one.
Okay.
That's for underwater metal detecting.
Whoa, it's a whole new ball game.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's not that expensive to get into metal detecting, so.
The next news story that we're going to talk about is sort of a similar thing. This person didn't have a metal detector, but they were just walking in the Swiss Alps like a hiker, and they found a coin, an ancient Roman coin that led to what people think is an ancient shrine.
Yeah,
high up
that's
in the Swiss
very
Alps.
cool.
Yeah, it is cool. There's all sorts of stuff. There was coins, there were these rock crystals, which was maybe why this place was like a holy site. And then in the town nearby, there were references to mountain goddesses. So there's an idea that maybe this is what they were worshiping, this like very sort of high up and difficult to reach area.
Yeah, almost like a pilgrimage.
I read SPQR, which is a book about ancient Rome, at the beginning of the year, and it was so interesting. We cover a lot of things from ancient Rome often at All That's Interesting, but it's not like it was not something I ever studied or anything in school, so I wanted to learn more about it. And this book was fantastic, and it talks about all sorts of things, but what this reminded me of was the Romans, as they like conquered places, just sort of brought other deities home and just absorbed them into their religion.
Oh, okay.
So I wonder, I don't know what these mountain goddesses were, but I wonder if that was something that happened.
Do we consider, is ancient Roman, like their pantheon, is that considered pagan, or is pagan like more pre that?
I think I'm not sure. I think paganism might be a thing in relation to like Christianity.
That's what I thought. I think pagan just kind of all pre-Christian, pre-Judaism,
right?
Like I guess it's like any polytheistic, religion seems to be lumped under paganism. But then we were talking about, or I wrote something recently about the history of Christmas trees and how that like came out of the Yule log, and we talked about Krampus and all of these different Christmas traditions that have been adapted from old pagan traditions. Even the idea of like Santa Claus kind of comes from European pagan ideas. So it's really like interesting to look back and see the smaller sects of religion that were kind of prominent in areas and like these more like local deities. And then really interesting to think that the Romans were just like absorbing them too. They're like, yeah, that one's ours. Yeah, that's ours now. And then so now we talk about it when we look at like Edith Wharton's mythology, that like the quintessential Roman mythology book, and they're all lumped together. I'm curious how many of them were amendments to that.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a fascinating question. I don't know.
And then funny to think that the Christians effectively did the same thing.
Yeah. Right. No, that's really interesting because, the Romans, they had no problem absorbing deities until they ran up against Christianity, which said there has to be just one.
Right.
Therefore, all these other ones that you have, like, they must go. But then Christianity started absorbing things too. As time went on.
Not the deities, but the traditions and the things surrounding it. So it was like, I think part of it was like to appease people, to be like, hey, look, you guys can keep doing that thing you're doing. Yeah. But now we're going to call it something different.
Right.
So that it makes us and our God happy.
Yeah.
But you don't actually have to change much of anything.
When I was, I can't remember I think I wrote the Krampus article. Maybe I was editing it. I can't remember. But anyway, they talked about how like, he was this pagan symbol, like you said, but then in like a nod to like Christian attempts to get rid of him, they incorporated things like, I think he holds like a chain and a basket, and these are things that are like small nods to Christian traditions. Yeah. Which I thought was it's wild.
On a completely different note. Yeah. there is no transition here.
No.
But they have officially announced that dogs at Chernobyl, or in the vicinity of Chernobyl, are now genetically distinct from dogs elsewhere. Which really not that surprising. I think I might have wrote something about frogs at Chernobyl recently as well. But just they examined 302 dogs living different distances from Chernobyl power plant. And here's a quote from one of the biologists who authored this study. He said, "I was completely surprised by the near total differentiation between the two populations. The fact that they've existed really in relative isolation for quite some time. This is a unique opportunity and a unique population of animals." Presumably at a certain point, dogs, like, I don't know the actual mile radius, but like the fact that all these dogs were pulled from a sample of like varying distances. And they found that the ones closest to Chernobyl were just not the same anymore. Yeah.
Based on what I read about this is like this study is still in its early days. And they just want to figure out like how these dogs, how being exposed to this radiation affects them and what it takes to actually survive a catastrophe like this. Right. Because what I read online was that they think the area is going to be unsafe for like 20,000 years for humans. Oh my God. And I was curious because I remember learning about Chernobyl in college mostly and like seeing like birth defects. And so I was trying to find out if these dogs had birth defects. And like I couldn't really, it seems like most of them are kind of doing like they have these big families, they have like packs, they're like hanging out in train stations. Yeah, they seem pretty healthy. And
that was the same thing with the frogs. I remember it now. It was just the coloration of them was different. They were like a deeper green or a lighter green, depending on how much radiation they were exposed to. But
because I read that like small, like, they think that there's been more like albino birds, and both birds and voles, so I guess just like smaller animals, have shown like lower fertility rates and some other like health things. But from what I could tell in this study, it seems like the dogs are doing okay. They're just kind of trying to figure out why these dogs are doing All right.
Yeah, I that's what I'm mostly curious about is like if it is so unsafe for humans to be there. Yeah, what is it that allows a certain? I mean, how unsafe is it for humans to be there? I guess is the other question. Is it like? And this is like a bit speculative, but like these dogs are genetically distinct, whatever that means. But like you said, they seem to be doing fine. So is the concern then that maybe humans could live there, but eventually like our genetic makeup would be altered to the point where it's like you're not quite human, and so is that the concern then that like?
I'm not sure if this study is like the chicken and the egg question. Like, are these dogs different now because of what happened, or is a difference that their ancestors had the reason why they survived?
Right.
Yeah.
I think either way, it's bound to turn up interesting conclusions, because if it is that the dogs were altered by the radiation but are otherwise fine, then like what does that mean for potential humans who go there? Or if it's like what you said, there was something in their DNA originally that allowed them to be fine. Is there a way that can be like recreated elsewhere?
Yeah. Or like, what does that mean if there are nuclear disasters in the future, I guess, or like a nuclear bomb or something?
Right.
The next story we're going to talk about is about these Moai statues on Easter Island, because they found a new one.
They did in the bottom of a dried up lake bed near a volcano, which I think it was the first time they ever found one of these statues actually in the water.
I wonder how it got there. This was an accident, or?
They said it was the first time they'd found it inside a thing of water, but now they think there might have been more, because typically these things always were, they were never isolated. They were always in groups.
Yeah. And they were like partially buried, right? Most of them. And then.
Yeah. And that region that they were in was for the past like 200 to 300 years was like a 10-foot deep laguna, which dried up because of ongoing climate change and severe droughts that are affecting parts of Chile.
Oh.
So it's like a silver lining kind of thing. It's like, cool. Yeah. I mean, there's like a lot of bad droughts and everything's drying up, but look what we found.
This keeps happening in like, I think it was, I want to say Utah, and in Italy, they found all these like old ships and rivers and lakes and stuff because the water level is falling. But what made me, another class I took in college, one of the most fascinating classes I took was about environmental disasters, and basically this idea that societal collapse is caused by environmental disasters. So it presented all these like examples of societies that had faced an environmental collapse and then collapsed themselves. And one of the examples was Easter Island, because the thesis that was put forward was that the Easter Islanders were building these statues and they were chopping down a lot of wood so they could transport the statues. And this eventually led to losing all the trees on the island, which led the society to collapse. And I was trying to like research this before we talked. It's been a long time since I took the class. And I guess there's been some pushback against this theory in like the society maybe didn't actually collapse until the Europeans arrived, which I think makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've definitely heard that theory, which sounds right based on literally everywhere the Europeans went.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But that is a really interesting idea, though, because there are a lot of Moai statues. Like a lot of them. Yeah. Which I'm so curious about them, like from like a historical, symbolic perspective, like why they made so many. I mean, that's one of the like Earth's great mysteries, right? Is like, why did they build all these statues? And that's like the one that I'm like, actually, I really want to know, though.
Yeah, I have no idea. You should go.
I should. Yeah. I think that would be a very cool trip.
Adventure. Well, that wraps up the news articles that we wrote this month that we thought were especially cool and interesting.
Yeah, 5 of our favorites. And we'll see what happens next month with amateur metal detector ring.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be something.
I'm sure there will be. But we do have a few major anniversaries this month that we also want to talk about.
Yeah.
The first one being the centennial, right? That's a 100-year anniversary?
Yeah.
Centennial? Hey, look at me. I know words. I'm a writer.
Yeah, you are.
But it is the 100-year anniversary of the first issue of Time magazine, which is kind of neat to think about. And like, I don't know, I was a bit surprised. For some reason, I thought Time was older.
So did I. Yeah, I completely agree. I guess the 1920s were a long time ago, but yeah, it was their first issue. The guy on the cover was Joseph G. Cannon, who they called Uncle Joe. I think it's kind of funny since some people call Biden Uncle Joe. I've heard. But he was this guy who's in Congress for like almost 50 years and Speaker of the House and everything. And apparently, you know, their whole thesis in setting out was to highlight people who they thought were important to like history, and this idea that like people make history. And we don't remember him now, or probably most of us don't. But in 1923, he was a pretty big deal, and he was about to retire, which is why he was on the cover.
Yeah, I mean, he'd been in Congress for 50 years.
46 years, but almost,
46, well, almost 50 years. So that's late 1870s. That's weird. That's weird to think about.
I know. I wrote down one of his quotes because I thought it was good. He said, "Sometimes in politics, one must duel with skunks, but no one should be fool enough to allow skunks to choose the weapons."
Huh.
Yeah, some wisdom from Uncle Joe Cannon.
People spoke so differently.
Yeah.
That's like, you would spend like a week coming up with that now. You know what I mean? It'd be like...
You tweeted.
Like, I got to sound really smart. That's like sitting in your Twitter drafts for like a month and you're like tinkering with it every time.
Yeah.
That sounds like it was just off the top of his head.
Probably. Yeah, so happy 100th birthday, Time Magazine. That was March 3rd. Yeah. Another anniversary for March is the death of Harriet Tubman, who died in 1913, 110 years ago.
Jeez.
Yeah. That's another thing where like 110 years is a long time and isn't a long time, like in the scheme of things. And to think that someone who, you know, we learn about in school as something so ancient, it feels like when you're a kid anyway, was not really that long ago. 110 years she died.
Right. Yeah. I mean, all of American history is kind of new still.
Yeah. I think, you know, in the scheme of things, it's crazy to think like slavery was 1860s, it ended, or that's when the Civil War ended, and then that only 100 years later, like the civil rights movement happened, and we're not even 100 years from that. So I think that's crazy. But yeah, Harriet Tubman, I mean, I hope people know her story, but she was one of the conductors on the Underground Railroad, a freed slave herself, and you know, she would go back into the South and bring other people north, and she, I guess maybe her most famous quote, or probably up there, she told Frederick Douglass that she never lost a single passenger in all these trips from the South to the North. That was kind of cool.
So yeah, rest in peace, Harriet Tubman.
Yeah.
Someone who I don't want to rest in peace. Joseph Stalin died 70 years ago.
Yeah. The story of his death is so insane.
I
don't know if there was a movie.
It's not funny, but they made that movie, The Death of Stalin. Did you ever see that?
I did, yeah.
Okay, that movie is hilarious. Weirdly accurate, though.
It's so nuts. It was like right before he died, he was kind of like, I mean, he, you know, had a reputation by then. He had killed millions of people through famine and purges and the gulag and everything. But in the 1950s, leading up to his death, his advisors were worried he was going to start a new purge or a new war or something. And then he got really, he didn't get sick, but he one day just kind of like dropped and was unconscious. And it's so funny, like his guards didn't call any doctors. They called his advisors and they didn't want to get involved. They didn't want to get in trouble when he woke up. So they were like, yeah, he's probably fine. He'll like sleep it off. And then he didn't wake up. So they finally called the doctors, but Stalin had sent all his doctors. He'd had them arrested already. So they had to bring in new doctors. The doctors were so nervous that their hands were shaking. And one guy, I don't know why, but he took out Stalin's like dentures and like dropped them because he was so nervous. And they didn't know what to do and they didn't want to get in trouble. And then he died.
I was going to say, meanwhile, to anyone listening who hasn't actually seen the movie The Death of Stalin, I want to say Ray Fine is in it. I was wrong. Ray Fine is not in this. Steve Buscemi is. Jeffrey Tambor.
Is Steve Buscemi Khrushchev?
I think he is, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Oh God, it's a really funny movie, and like it's written as a comedy, as a black comedy, but it is like sort of weirdly accurate to what actually was going on with everything.
Yeah.
With Stalin just being dead and everyone being too afraid.
Yeah.
That he wasn't dead to like
get in trouble. And
yeah.
I think the other crazy thing too is after he died, I mean, there's like some speculation of like, what what exactly happened? Like, did he have a stroke, which is sort of the official, or was he poisoned by one of his advisors? Because they very quickly were like, well, we're done with Stalin, and like Khrushchev took power. And
yeah, I mean, yeah, no one was like a fan of Stalin's. It was just he was the guy in charge. And sorry, you got to deal with that.
Khrushchev later claimed that one of the advisors admitted to poisoning him, but that should be taken with a grain of salt, I think.
Yeah. I mean, no one could ever admit to it because, like, despite the fact that he was now dead, it was like, oh, you still can't admit to killing Stalin.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's still a prison sentence, regardless of whether or not he was liked.
Yeah. That's a strange story. Joseph Stalin. Yeah.
So March 5th, 1953, death of Joseph Stalin. Exactly 2 weeks later. Exactly 2 weeks later, the first Academy Awards was on
TV. Yeah.
On TV, yeah.
Yeah, I looked up some of the, the most interesting thing I actually found out looking into this was that Ronald Reagan was an announcer at the Academy Awards.
Oh.
Yeah, he was still an actor then. He was in his 40s. I'm not even sure he appeared on screen, but he was announcing things.
Interesting.
Yeah, before he ran for governor or president or anything.
Yeah, I always forget Reagan was an actor.
Yeah, I thought that was really funny. But Best Picture was The Greatest Show on Earth. Have you seen that?
I haven't, no, which is
either.
Weird because I was a film student.
Well, I read, apparently it's considered one of the worst Best Picture winners, so maybe that's why it wasn't included in your curriculum.
Seems right. Because I did look up a little bit about the film, and it was just like about the daily lives of like circus performers, trapeze artists, and a clown. It definitely seemed like a weird Best Picture
it's like
choice.
A murderer there too, or something, or there's some killer in their midst. Yeah, it
was a weird choice. It's not like I guess I expected it to be a film that I would have heard of, but I don't know. The Academy Awards are weird.
I think I've heard it like mentioned in like, I don't know, other TV shows or something, but
yeah.
So that won Best Picture. Best Actor went to Gary Cooper for High Noon, which I also haven't seen.
I did see High Noon. Okay. I had a Western class.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I don't like Westerns.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure I've seen a lot of Westerns.
There are some really good ones. The Good, the Bad, the Ugly is very good. They just are a bit the same. So when you watch like every single week a new Western, it's like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
More deserts and gruff men shooting guns.
Yeah. Did you like did you watch Firefly?
No. The
like
Nathan Fillion.
Western. Yeah. I liked that.
Well, I do watch The Mandalorian, which is arguably a space Western. But
is that Star Wars?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I just know that Pedro Pascal's in it.
Yes, he is.
Yes, he is. Yeah. Anyway, the Best Actress we'll just throw in there too is Shirley Booth for Comeback Little Sheba. Which is
I don't know anything about that.
Nothing about. Yeah.
Nope.
But yeah, it was the first time it was on TV, which was, I think, exciting, and obviously that tradition continues.
Yeah, and there was no drama. No one got slapped.
I know. I tried to look up like anything, and it was like, no, it was all pretty normal. About 10 years after that, something that has nothing to do with movies, or I guess you could argue there's some, I don't know, I think there's been movies set there maybe. But anyway, it's Alcatraz prison closed in 1963. So that was big news. And we've covered a couple of stories about this on the site about the time people tried to escape from there and the time the activists occupied it. So we can kind of get into those stories really fast if you want to. But yeah, people tried to escape in the 60s. 4 of them. I looked up this, I didn't know this story very much at all, but in 1962, they just dug a hole through like the ventilation ducts, and they used raincoats to build a raft, and 3 of them escaped.
I mean, that's, you got to give them credit.
Yeah. I think it's funny because the FBI was like, they definitely died. Like after they got into the water, they definitely died. But their family a lot of them were like, no, we heard from them. And the FBI was like, no, they died. They're definitely dead. So it's interesting. It's funny, after it closed, like there was this occupation by Native Americans, and they wanted to turn it into like a cultural center and school, and the government didn't want to do that. But this lasted like a long time. And then the government eventually cut power to the island, and a fire broke out, and now it's a national park. So
weird.
Yeah. What an odd place.
It does seem weird to want to turn it into like a school also.
Yeah. I mean, it was empty. I mean, it was closed by then.
Fair enough.
And it was a form of protest. Like they wanted to protest government treatment. And I don't know. I would go to Alcatraz if I had the chance. I don't think I have gone. I've been to San Francisco before, but.
Yeah. It would be interesting to see.
Yeah.
I used to live near not a prison, but like another kind of infamous site that was torn down. My mind went like 30 different directions there. I was like, yeah, do you think Alcatraz is haunted? Oh yeah, there are haunted prisons. I used to live near Dixmont. It was a mental institution that was torn down to build a Walmart.
Oh, haunted Walmart.
Well, then they couldn't build the Walmart because there were, I think, still ongoing landslides where Dixmont had been. And like, of course, paranormal experts came in and were like, oh yeah, it's the ghosts of all the former patients who are here. They don't, like taking their land back. But it's like really fascinating. Like even when I was a kid, it was already shut down. People used to like break into it all the time and like go and explore like this mental institution.
Yeah. Yikes.
I never did. My mom wouldn't let me. Because she's a good parent.
At least you were a good kid if you didn't sneak off and do it anyway.
I was such a good kid. I didn't do anything.
Oh, I was too. I read this morning, there's this island near New York called Hart's Island where they bury people basically like no money and like stillborn babies and like things like that. And it's been closed forever. And they decided they're going to make it not into a park, but they're going to open it and allow people to like come and visit. Because there are a couple of cemeteries in New York that are just really beautiful. And you can go and like walk through and the graves are so cool. And this isn't like that because there's no like elaborate tombstones or anything, but they are opening the island for people to come in. For the first time, it was always forbidden to go till now.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I kind of want to go once it's open.
Yeah, that would be really cool. But they still have like tombstones and stuff though, right? So it is like
they have like white plaques in the ground, I think.
Okay.
Because like the cemetery in Brooklyn, Greenwood, has like all these like crazy mausoleums and these really elaborate like animals or angels or something like tombstones.
Yeah.
It's really cool. And this is not that. But I guess New York has had a lot of success in turning abandoned places into public spaces. So this is their attempt to do that with this.
They kind of need to.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, like the High Line was like, a railroad and Governor's Island was, I think, like a military installation or something at one point. So yeah, I think it's cool. I'll definitely go when it's open. It sounds kind of creepy.
Yeah, I went to that cemetery near my house for a story a couple months ago.
Yeah.
And it took me forever to find the spot that I even needed to like not just find the tombstones for the Black veterans, but also to find the spot that led to the tombstones. Yeah. And then obviously trekking through the woods after. Right. But we drove around the cemetery for like 20 minutes just trying to find the entrance to this one spot. And I saw some of the craziest mausoleums. There was one that just had like 2 huge saxophones. I was like, yeah, it was really cool. I looked at it. I was like, is like Duke Ellington buried here? Like, and I didn't know or something. Like, it was like so elaborate.
Wow. Did you find out whose it was?
No, but I have a picture on my phone. I'm sure if I zoom in, I could.
Yeah, I wonder. I'm curious.
Yeah, I know. You always have to wonder like who these big tombs belong to.
Yeah, definitely.
There's another cemetery around here. The tombstone is just an egg.
Oh.
Like it's just a big stone egg, and on it says, I am the Eggman, or I was the Eggman. And I was like, is that a Beatles reference?
The final historical anniversary we wanted to talk about today was the birth of Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yeah.
March 15th would have been her 90th birthday. Obviously, Supreme Court Justice from, I believe, 1993 until 2020 when she died.
Wow.
Yeah.
Easily one of like the most influential, like big name Supreme Court justices, I think, of all time. I think she's going to go down as like a really, I mean, she already has, but like, looking like 100 years in the future, like that, her name's going to be one of those names that you look to and you go, that really mattered.
Yeah.
Like everything she did, that was really important.
Just being one of the only like women, well, there's more now, but one of the early ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember when she died, I was sitting in like Madison Square Park with some people and we all got like the news alerts on our phone and being like, oh my God, that's big news.
Yeah, she died pre-pandemic?
And it was like during the pandemic.
Was it okay, I couldn't remember.
She died in September 2020. So yeah, it was during the pandemic.
Wow. Okay, yeah. In her honor though, we did find a really good sounding cocktail.
Yeah.
Which I'm also partial to because it is a pun and I love puns. But it's the Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Love it.
And there are a few different versions of this cocktail. But the one that I found that I thought sounded really good, and so did our editor, Kara, the Ruth Bader Ginsburg, 1.5 ounces of Malfi lemon gin, 3/4 an ounce of Cointreau, 3/4 an ounce of lime juice, 3/4 ounce of simple syrup. Super simple, easy cocktail. All the best cocktails, in my opinion, are.
Yeah, that sounds great. I can almost make that. I'm mucking all the ingredients right now because I don't have lemon gin. I have normal gin at home.
I could almost make that. I just need everything.
I just need 4 ingredients.
Well, simple syrup's the easiest thing in the world to make.
Oh, you can make it yourself. You don't have to buy it.
Oh, it's equal parts sugar and water, and then you just boil the sugar down and then let it cool, and that's literally all simple syrup is.
I guess I have no sugar, so I would probably buy it.
Oh, well, there you go.
But there's a liquor store down the street from me in my new place, so
there you go.
Easily
Nice.
done. Yeah.
And as I learned from my brief stint in my brief trip to New York that I took, liquor stores are open pretty late.
Yeah, and on Sundays. Some places
And
aren't.
on Sundays.
Yeah.
They're open here on Sundays, but they close early. But I remember we were staying at the Airbnb in Bed-Stuy. We were walking back from like a late dinner and decided to stop and grab a bottle of whiskey. And it was like, we walked in and it wasn't even like, because in Pennsylvania, all the liquor stores are state run. So they're like, some of them are like kind of just like little grocery store looking things. And some of them are a little bit nicer, like the fine wine and good spirits. But it is like a typical store. You walk in, there are shelves and whatnot. This place we stopped in New York was like borderline a bodega, but with only liquor and then just like a counter that I walked up to, and like they had like a sliding glass thing, and they're like, yeah, what do you want? And I was like, the Evan Williams that's sitting there that is $20 more than it is in Pennsylvania.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny, where I'm from in Washington State, like they have liquor in the grocery stores, like anything, hard liquor and everything. And in New York, you have to go to like a liquor store.
Yeah.
Which is fine.
We recently got wine and beer in liquor stores or
Really?
in
Grocery
grocery stores. Yeah. But like for a while, like I want to say maybe it was like 3 or 4 years ago that this happened. But like when I first turned 21, I couldn't just go to the like Giant Eagle near me, which is a grocery store chain.
Yeah.
And I had to go to a beer distributor. And then if I wanted wine or liquor, I had to go to the liquor store.
Yeah. When I turned 21, I went to school in Ohio, and the town I was in was a dry town until the 1980s. So there were no liquor stores in the town. There was one like right outside the city limits, and that you'd have a friend with a car and then drive to the Walmart, which is also like way outside the city limits.
Yeah. How do you make Ohio worse?
No. Ohio's great.
Be sober in it.
No, let the record show. I think Ohio is fantastic. But that
as
town
a
was a dry
Pennsylvania
town.
resident, I don't. And I'll stand by
Throwing
it.
down the gauntlet.
No, actually, I've been to Cleveland a couple of times recently, and I actually really like Cleveland. That might be a controversial opinion.
I think Cleveland's fantastic. It's
Cleveland's
beautiful.
great.
It's on the water. It's old.
They have a ton of
great beer.
microbreweries now, and like
I think Great Lakes is one of my favorite beers, and I don't know why you can't find it in New York. But do they have Great Lakes in Pennsylvania?
they do. Yeah.
Really? Huh.
Yeah, I could literally. There's a beer distributor like within walking distance of my house. I could go get Great Lakes right now.
Oh my god. It's interesting. I have to enlist you to like ship me some Great Lakes or something.
I could.
Yeah.
I could do that. Yeah.
I love Great Lakes, and I haven't had it in so long. So I haven't been to Ohio since 2018, I think.
Oh God, yeah. You know what? If I ever, next time I find myself in New York, I'll bring some Great Lakes up and we
that'd
can
be
get
awesome.
together.
Yeah, we do an actual history happy hour in person.
Yeah.
Some Great Lakes beer.
Yeah, we'll go into the office. Have a Great Lakes and record.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, this was History Happy Hour for March, and we'll be back in April with more exciting anniversaries and
Probably another story about metal detecting and
probably so. Yeah. It's been a popular one. I mean, I love those stories. I'm always happy to talk about those because they're so...
it's fun.
It's fun. Yeah.
And then April coming up, we have Lalachusa is next. And then we've got, I think that's when we're starting our Titanic series is
Let's
through
see.
April.
Yeah, Lalachusa, and then Titanic should be starting like right after that, and that'll be a 6-part series on the Titanic. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll keep us busy for a little while.
Yeah. well, that's been a whole thing behind the scenes. So
I know. I told my friends, like, ask me anything about the Titanic, and I think I could probably answer you at this point because we've just been like pouring over it.
I'm basically more of an expert than James Cameron is now at this point.
You can direct the sequel.
There we go. Titanic 2, Electric Boogaloo.
There you go. Yeah.
So stay tuned for that, for more behind the scenes updates on my Titanic movie.
Yes. Yeah, we'll just close this off, I guess, by reminding you about the survey that we're conducting this spring. I'll say the URL again, surveymonkey.com/r/airwave. And you can win a $500 Amazon gift card.
And possibly get your own metal detector.
That's right.
They sell them. You can even get a knot bottom of the barrel and 500. You could get 5. You and 4 friends, just by filling out this survey and answering a few short questions about our show, you and 4 friends could go on a little metal detecting journey together.
And you could
and
find
then maybe
incredible
we'll
treasure.
talk about you on this show. See,
yes.
It all comes full circle.
All comes full circle.
Yeah. So surveymonkey.com/r/airwave if you want to win 5 metal detectors.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then we'll say again, we love it when you leave reviews. So leave reviews on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever. Follow us on Facebook. We have 2 pages, All It's Interesting and History Revealed. And on Instagram, we're at Real History Uncovered. Which is the same as our TikTok handle, I think.
Yep, it is the same as our TikTok.
Yeah, and TikTok's been really fun. You should check out our TikToks. And and obviously check us out online at allit'sinteresting.com. We always have new and fun stories.
Yeah, and if you want to get in contact with us about the show, you can always give us a call at 929-526-3029 or send an email over to podcast@allthat'sinteresting.com. If you have a question or you just want to say hi, or
tell us how great the show
you're
is.
James Cameron and you are interested in Titanic 2 Electric Boogaloo.
Hello, this is James Cameron, and
this is a cease and desist from James Cameron's people.
Yeah, we run that risk.
Yeah, it's fine.
All right, well, we'll be back soon with our La Lechuza and then with the Titanic. So watch your feeds.
Toodles.